actually have to read through and try to understand, right? And the Vedas talk about so many different subject matter. So the author of all the Vedas and the Puranas and the Upanishads, he compiled this Shrimad Bhagavatam for us to be able to actually understand the essential truth of all Vedic literature. And it's presented in a way that is very palatable and very digestible. And of course, and then Prabhupada has taken these purports, the Bhaktivedanta purports, which are really his own devotional ecstasies. And we get a chance to actually, just by reading these purports and reading these verses, one can very quickly make spiritual progress. In fact, out of the 5 primary limbs of bhakti, reading of Shrimad Bhagavatam is actually one of the primary limbs of the practice of bhakti.
Yes, Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna, and by reading Bhagavatam in that spirit that we are in the presence of Krishna, we can deepen our relationship with Krishna and understand him more and more. So this is where we had left last time. This is 6th canto, chapter 1, text 19. This kind of summarizes the power of devotional service and the best form of atonement. Sakrin mana Krishna padara vindayo niveshitam tad gunaragiyir iha nateyamam pashabritasya tad bhatan swapne pipashyanti chirna niskritaha. Although not having fully realized Krishna, persons who have even once surrendered completely unto his lotus feet and who have become attracted to his name, form, qualities, and pastimes are completely freed of all sinful reactions, for they have thus accepted the true method of atonement. Even in dreams, such surrendered souls do not see Yamaraj or his order carriers who are equipped with ropes to bind the sinful. So this is where we are left. Yeah. This is just the context. Let me just spin myself. So in order to prove this statement, now Sukadeva Goswami is going to describe a historical account of a person called Ajamila.
So just for those that did not attend the last couple of sessions, what's really going on here is in the 5th canto, there was a great discussion on all kinds of suffering situations, hellish experiences that living entities undergo because of a result of so many fruitive activities. So hearing that, Maharaj Parikshit's heart is overcome with deep feelings of compassion, and he wants to know what is the way out, because that is the nature of someone who is self-realized, that they experience great compassion. So love and compassion, they are 2 sides of the same experience of bhakti. And so, you know, so then Sukadeva Goswami, he tries to give him some, he's testing his student. And so he tells him first that, yes, by the practice of atonement, one can actually come out of these suffering, which is then rejected by Maharaj Parikshit because he recognizes that atonement is temporary and because it does not address the real ignorance of the heart.
Yeah, the atonement based on ritualistic processes from karma kanda or the processes of jnana, though both the atonements are not sufficient. So he's looking for the ultimate atonement, which Sukadeva Goswami presents as the process of bhakti. So we'll continue.
In this regard, learned scholars and saintly persons describe a very old historical incident involving a discussion between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraj. Please hear of this from me. So we can skip this.
Yeah, so he's describing the Puranas, how Puranas are the historical accounts, and a devotee carefully studies all of them. The verse that I want to read is this is a very important verse that Rupa Goswami talks about. He says, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidhim Bina Ekantiki Harer Bhaktir Utpataeva Kalpate. Devotional service of the Lord that ignores the authorized Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, Puranas, Narada Pancharatra is simply an unnecessary disturbance in society. A devotee of Krishna must refer not only to the Vedas but also to the Puranas. One should not foolishly consider the Puranas mythological. If they were mythological, Sukadeva Goswami would not have taken the trouble to recite the old historical incidents concerning the life of Ajamila. So this is a very important point that we will see sometimes people, they like to practice bhakti or want to practice bhakti just based on their own sentiment or on their own concoction. And without having a basis in the Vedic scriptures, like the Shruti is the Vedas, Smriti is the Puranas, Mahabharatas. So those are the Smritis, and Puranas are also Smriti. Pancharatri, which is the composition by Narada about the details of bhakti. So our practice and process should be based on these scriptures. Otherwise, it can create a havoc in the society. As you can see, sometimes upstarts, they try to come up with some new methods of uh, worshipping God, or they become God themselves.
In the city known as Kanyakubja, there was a Brahmana named Ajamil who married a prostitute maidservant and lost all his Brahminical qualities because of the association of that low-class woman. This fallen Brahmana, Ajamil, gave trouble to others by arresting them, by cheating them in gambling, or directing them. This was the way he earned his livelihood and maintained his wife and children.
My dear king, while he thus spent his time in abominable sinful activities to maintain his family of many sons, 88 years of his life passed by. So he encountered or married the prostitute when he was a young Brahmana, and so he looks like he spent at least 60, 70 years as the husband of that prostitute.
That old man Ajamil had 10 sons, of whom the youngest was a baby named Narayan. Since Narayan was the youngest of all the sons, he was naturally very dear to both his father and his mother.
Because of the child's broken language and awkward movements, old Ajamil was very much attached to him. He always took care of the child and enjoyed the child's activities.
Here it is clearly, so we'll read this purport, maybe a few lines. Here it is clearly mentioned that the child Narayan was so young that he could not even speak or walk properly. Since the old man was very attached to the child, he enjoyed the child's activities, and because the child's name was Narayan, the old man always chanted the holy name of Narayan. Although he was referring to the small child and not to the original Narayan, the name of Narayan is so powerful that even by chanting his son's name, he was becoming purified. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam. Srila Rupa Goswami has therefore declared that if one's mind is somehow or other attracted by the holy name of Krishna, one is on the path of liberation.
It is customary in Hindu society for parents to give their children names like Krishna Das, Govinda Das, Narayan Das, and Vrindavan Das. Thus they chant the names Krishna, Govinda, Narayan, and Vrindavan and get the chance to be purified. When Ajamil chewed food and ate it, he called the child to chew and eat. And when he drank, he called the child to drink also. Always engaged in taking care of the child and calling his name Narayan, Ajamil could not understand that his own time was now exhausted and that death was upon him.
So this is actually, Prabhupada is describing here that this is called Agyata Sukriti. So if any one of you have ever wondered how one gets the opportunity to engage in bhakti, it is described that bhakti comes from bhakti, or it comes actually specifically from a devotee or a bhakta. And the way we get that, the seed of bhakti, is by this process of Agyata Sukriti, which means unknown credit, right? That just, he didn't know, he wasn't really even calling Krishna or Narayan, he was simply calling the name of his own son.
When the time of death arrived for the foolish Ajamil, he began thinking exclusively of his son Narayan. In the second canto of Shrimad Bhagavatam 2.1.6, Sukadeva Goswami says, Etavan Sankhya Yogyabhyam Swadharma Parinishthaya Janmalabha Param Pumsham Ante Narayana Smriti.
The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by acquirement of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of one's occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Somehow or other, Ajamil consciously or unconsciously chanted the name of Narayan at the time of death, Ante Narayana Smriti, and therefore he became all perfect simply by concentrating his mind on the name of Narayan.
So this is the perfection of life that is given in the Bhagavatam. that whatever we have done, whatever spiritual life we have practiced through our life is tested at the time of death in the form of our ability to remember Krishna at the time of death. So it's not easy to remember Krishna at the time of death, because sometimes people say, I can just do whatever I want. At the time of my death, I'll remember God. And that is not so easy. It only happens by Krishna's mercy. When he sees that we have dedicated our life to his service, then he allows us to remember him.
So actually everything that we are doing right now is, the result of that we will actually get at the time of our death. And the whole process of Krishna consciousness, actually the entire Shrimad Bhagavatam is actually, it starts with this very question: what is the duty of someone who is about to die, right? Because Maharaj Parikshit, he realized he gets to find out that he's going to die in 7 days. And so that's when he starts, he sits down on the banks of the Ganga trying to find out, like, what, who can tell me what is the duty of someone. So Prabhupada says that he knew that he was going to die in 7 days, but none of us do. And so the entire life is actually, in that sense, a preparation, so that when one has to die, then one is fully prepared. And one can die, Prabhupada says, not like a cat or a dog, right? Without awareness or consciousness, but with full, with the mind completely attached and focused at the lotus feet of Krishna.
And one practical application of this in our day-to-day life would be that when we go through some difficulty, either bodily, like sickness, or some injury, or some other difficulty, financial or material or relationship based, those are the moments then we can test, am I able to remember Krishna in these difficult times? And not only that, when we are going through some good time in our life, are we able to remember Krishna? Because if we are able to consciously create that habit in these good and difficult times to remember Krishna, then it will become that much easier for us to remember Krishna at the time of death.
So we'll take some pauses, but we just wanted to get to a good place, and then we'll pause. Ajamil then saw 3 awkward persons with deformed bodily features, fierce, twisted faces, and hair standing erect on their bodies. With ropes in their hands, they had come to take him away to the abode of Yamaraj. When he saw them, he was extremely bewildered, and because of attachment to his child, who was playing a short distance away, Ajamil began to call him loudly by his name. Thus, with tears in his eyes, he somehow or other chanted the holy name of Narayan.
My dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamil, who had certainly chanted without offense, because he had chanted in complete anxiety. So this is a very unique situation. As soon as Ajamil saw those messengers of Yamadut come to capture his soul, out of great fear, he called out to his son, because he was afraid of for himself, and he was also afraid that they might harm his child, Narayan. So he called out to his little boy, who was just like maybe a toddler, and Narayan, Narayan. And as soon as he did that, the carriers of Lord Vishnu, Vishnu Dutas, they immediately also appeared on the scene because of his calling out in that helpless condition.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks, Hari Kirtanam Nishaya Patan Katham Bhutasya Bhartur Nama Bhruva. The order carriers of Lord Vishnu came because Ajamil had chanted the holy name of Narayan. They did not consider why he was chanting. While chanting the name of Narayan, Ajamil was actually thinking of his son, but simply because they heard Ajamil chanting the Lord's name, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately came for Ajamil's protection. Hari Kirtan is actually meant to glorify the holy name, form, pastimes, and qualities of the Lord. Ajamil, however, did not glorify the form, qualities, or paraphernalia of the Lord. He simply chanted the holy name. Nevertheless, that chanting was sufficient to cleanse him of all sinful activities. As soon as the Vishnu Dutas heard their master's name being chanted, they immediately came.
The order carriers of Yamaraj were snatching the soul from the core of the heart of Ajamil, the husband of the prostitute, but with resounding voices, the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, forbade them to do so. So a Vaishnava, one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, is always protected by the Lord Vishnu's order carriers. Because Ajamil had chanted the holy name of Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas not only immediately arrived on the spot, but also at once ordered the Yamadutas not to touch him. By speaking with resounding voices, the Vishnu Dutas threatened to punish the Yamadutas if they continued trying to snatch Ajamil's soul from his heart. The order carriers of Yamaraj have jurisdiction over all sinful living entities, but the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnudutas, are capable of punishing anyone, including Yamaraj, if he wrongs a Vaishnava. When the order carriers of Yamaraj, the son of the sun god, were thus forbidden, they replied, "Who are you, sirs, that have the audacity to challenge the jurisdiction of Yamaraj?" So Yamaraj is, by the way, is the son of the sun god, Surya. And he's very powerful. Krishna has given Yamaraj almost the power of omniscience, because he can observe activities, good and bad activities of every single living entity in this universe. And he keeps a record of that. So at the time of death, then he appropriately, the soul, he puts the soul in a good or bad situation in the next life, depending on the activities.
Dear sir, whose servants are you? Where have you come from? And why are you forbidding us to touch the body of Ajamil? Are you demigods from the heavenly planets, or are you sub-demigods, or are you the best of devotees? So they're trying to find out. So Ajamil is actually able to see this conversation, because now there are the Vishnudutas, who are the servants of Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna, who have come to take his body because he chanted the names of Narayan. But the Yamadutas, who are, the custodians of the god of death, and they are in charge of taking the soul, into another, into the next destination, they're also there. And so, Yamaraj, the order carriers of Yamaraj are really confused as to who these people are. So the order carriers of Yamaraj said, "Your eyes are just like the petals of lotus flowers, dressed in yellow silken garments, decorated with garlands of lotuses, and wearing very attractive helmets on your heads and earrings on your ears. You all appear fresh and youthful. Your 4 long arms are decorated with bows and quivers of arrows, and with swords, clubs, conchas, disc, and lotus flowers. Your effulgence has dissipated the darkness of this place with extraordinary illumination. Now, sir, why are you obstructing us?" So we'll continue, because it really gets interesting. They actually have a debate there. So should we skip and just continue? Sukhdev Goswami continued, "Being thus addressed by the messengers of Yamaraj, the servants of Vasudev smiled and spoke the following words in voices as deep as the sound of rumbling clouds. The blessed messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnudutas, said, "If you're actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principle and the symptoms of irreligion."
So this is a debate that's going to happen between them about what is religion and what is irreligion, what is dharma and what is adharma. What is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? So this is an important question. So Yamadutas now reply, that which is prescribed, so based on their understanding of what is right and what is wrong, what is sinful, that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitute dharma, the religious principles, and the opposite of that is irreligion. The Vedas are directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan and are self-born. This we have heard from Yamaraj. So we can read that a little bit. The servants of Yamaraj replied quite properly. They did not manufacture principles of religion or irreligion. Because they say that the dharma is what comes from the Vedas. So he says, Veda pranahito dharmo, hi adharmas tad viparyaya. Because Vedas are directly coming from Lord Narayan. So therefore, whatever is written in the Vedas, it is dharma, and anything that is outside or against the Vedic principles, that is adharma. So this is quite appropriate. They did not manufacture principles of religion or irreligion. Instead, they explained what they had heard from the authority Yamaraj. So 2 points for them, because they're following the Vedas and they heard it from Yamaraj. So they are not independent. Mahajano yena gataha sapantha. One should follow the Mahajana, the authorized person. Yamaraj is one of the 12 authorities. Therefore, the servants of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas, replied with perfect clarity when they said, Shushruma, we have heard. The members of modern civilization manufacture defective religious principles through speculative concoction. This is not dharma. They do not know what is dharma and what is adharma. Therefore, as stated in the beginning of Shrimad Bhagavatam, dharma projito ketavo atra. Dharma not supported by the Vedas is rejected from Shrimad Bhagavatam Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma comprises only that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavad Dharma is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. One must accept the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender to Him and whatever He says.
That is dharma. So I think
This-
Arjuna, for example, thinking that violence was adharma, was declining to fight, but Krishna urged him to fight. Arjuna abided by the orders of Krishna, and therefore he's actually a dharmi because the order of Krishna is dharma. So, so I guess this whole discussion of what is dharma and what is adharma, and this is, the basis of all dharma is actually something that is coming from Krishna or from the Supreme Lord, right? It's not something that we can manufacture, because many times we can think that, okay, if I, whatever I think is right, or if it feels right for me, then it is right, or, so on and so forth. But actually, there is a system of understanding what is dharma and what is not dharma.
The same thing applies to spirituality, because in the modern day and times, people think that whatever my heart says, whatever my mind says, if it feels good to me, that is spiritual, or that is dharma. And that is not actually supported by these statements of Vishnu Dutas, or even the Yamadutas. They're saying that one's conception of dharma and adharma should be based on the Vedas, because the Vedas are directly coming from Lord Vishnu.
So maybe we'll quickly, because we've been reading for quite some time, this is quite a section that needed to flow. There's still a lot more coming, but we'd like to pause here and see if you have any thoughts or reflections or anything that you heard that stood out for you, or kind of was striking for you. And by the way, Tarunjit, so nice to have you back. We thought of you, and we're so happy that you're back, and you look good.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, you're feeling fine?
Yes, definitely. I am completely okay. So
You're not feeling any weakness or anything like that?
Slight weakness is still there.
Okay.
Oh.
It will take some more time to become okay as per the doctors, but otherwise I'm completely fine. No problem.
We're so happy. You were
Thank you.
definitely in our thoughts and prayers. Yeah.
Yes, I'm also very happy to be able to join. And in fact, to take the exam on that day, I don't know how did I fare.
Oh, you took the exam also?
Yeah, you did pretty good. I looked at your answers. It was really good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I didn't know that you had corona, so so glad to hear that you are feeling good again. Everything is all right.
Okay, I am also feeling blessed to be back in this and to start with my routines there and normalizing the daily activities.
Wonderful.
That's nice. That's very nice. So anything that you've heard so far that you would like to reflect or share, or anything that bothered you?
I just, sorry.
Go, I mean, well, whoever wants to go first. Go ahead, Tarunji, since you're already unmuted.
Okay, it really was very interesting to know that even the Ajamila called his son Narayana, and his Narayana's Dutas arrived thinking that he is in distress and to give him support and stopped the Jamdutas. So this is really a fantastic thing, that whenever we call out God for help, whether our intention is to calling God or not, but if we're chanting the name of the God, the God, Supreme Godhead actually responded. And is that the reason why in India we have, I know many names kept for the children's names are kept after the gods?
Yeah, that is the main reason, as Prabhupada was saying, that unknowingly and throughout the day we are calling out the names of God, and that definitely accumulates as spiritual credit in the life of the person who's reciting the names, or anybody who's hearing those names. They all get the benefit, and it's very powerful.
Because, and we can talk a little bit more about that, that how, we'll get into that a little bit. So first, let's hear. I think Delia, you had something you wanted to say.
I just really like the concept of, I'm going to mispronounce it, Anjanta Sutri.
Yeah, Ajnata Sukriti, yes.
it's just like mercy. It's just saying Krishna comes into our heart spontaneously. I'm not so clear. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, agyata. Gyata means known or knowingly. Agyata means unknowingly. So when we do some spiritual activity unknowingly, like helping somebody who's spiritual, like a saintly person, if you help them, or do like call out names of God unknowingly, or do anything spiritual unknowingly, right? So that is called agyata sukriti. We get a credit. We get a spiritual credit in our account.
Can you imagine like the hotel chain?
Yeah.
Ramada, right? So
Ramada, India.
there is Rama, in that.
Yeah. Anybody who says that, they get a spiritual benefit of saying out names of Rama. So so there are so many ways Krishna is so merciful that and when that spiritual credit matures, then you'll see that suddenly that person becomes inclined towards spiritual life. Because sometimes we wonder that what happened, this person was not like this all his life, and suddenly now he's becoming interested in spiritual life. It's because the spiritual credit, agyata sukriti, keeps on accumulating, and it reaches a threshold at which, at that point, then suddenly becomes interested in God. And this may happen, this agyata sukriti can accumulate over lifetimes. And it's not just in this life, that balance can, and that's how a person becomes attracted to Krishna and then follows spiritual life.
And there are so many ways of collecting this this credit. So by the way, this is not normal karmic credit, because pious credits cannot create bhakti. So just because I went ahead and I engaged in some good karma cannot produce bhakti, but spiritual activities can produce bhakti. So for example, if I stepped out, and this is why we go out sometimes and we chant out in outdoors, right? Why? Because when somebody hears the holy name of Krishna without even understanding what's going on, they're actually accumulating spiritual credit. When we are at home and we're chanting the names, and this is why we could be chanting in our minds, or we could be chanting very softly. But the reason why we chant out loud is because there are insects, and there are plants, and there are living entities who are actually getting to hear that vibration, and by that they are accumulating their spiritual credit. When we get some prasad, right, the sanctified food that has been offered to Krishna, when we receive that unknowingly, we get some spiritual credit.
And like like hearing the church bell, for example, that's a sound that is coming from the house of God, right? So that bell, hearing that sound, it creates an agyata sukriti, and that's why the churches or temples, they used to be like the spire is very tall. So when you come out of the house, you see the spire of the temple, and then you have a spiritual feeling in your heart, or you bow down. That is agyata sukriti.
Or for that matter, if we see a devotee and we say, oh, they're so nice. Prabhupada says, even if we simply just say that, oh, they're such nice people, that starts our process of bhakti. And the reverse is also true.
Or even seeing a devotee, even without saying that they are good, or like seeing a spiritual person, that sight itself creates agyata sukriti.
Agyata sukriti. So agyata sukriti happens at what to speak of if you receive a book. And that's one of the reasons why we distribute these books, because just by coming in touch with the book, opening the book, reading the book, there's story over story over story, where people just get something, some contact, and their life is changed forever.
Even if somebody out of anger picks up a spiritual book and then tries to throw it away, there's a story where a person does that.
Oh, we have to tell that story. Oh wow, yes. So there's a story of this one man, and he was very proud and very arrogant.
He was very wealthy. He was a banker in Switzerland. This is a real story, maybe 20-30 years ago.
And so he was traveling, and so there was this this very simple devotee Mataji who was on that train, and she was trying to distribute some books. And so she approached him and she showed him this Krishna book, and so he was like so like such an arrogant person that he took the book, and she thought, okay, he's going to take the book, but he took the book, he ripped it apart, he threw it on the ground, put his feet on it, and then dragged her out of that train, and somehow just like
threw her out
of the train, because he was so angry and filled with so much of envy just to see her. And then if that was not enough, then he thought, oh, I've done such a great deed, or whatever, like he felt so good about like whatever he had done, that he thought, I'm going to take this book and I'm going to put it in my house, like as a souvenir, as
a trophy of my brave act
that I've done. And so he went and he took that and he put it in his, so he put it on a coffee table. So the cleaning lady or maid, whatever, she used to come and she saw that book, it was torn, and she thought, oh, let me put it together. So what she did was that she put it together and she
put it in the bookshelf.
She put it on a bookshelf. And then life happened, and this man, over a period of time, his life just completely fell apart.
And this is another situation, like he very consciously created a great offense against a devotee by insulting her and harming her, and also against the book. So his life basically started falling apart. He was a very wealthy person. His wife left him, divorced. The children got into drugs. They all left him, and he was in a miserable state of life after a few years.
And so then one day he just thought, okay, I'm just going to end my life now because, you know, like it's too much. So he went into this library and he thought he was going to take his life, but then he thought, okay, let me read something before whatever, before dying. So he reached out to the bookshelf and he was trying to get the Bible, I think, right? And but then his hand reached out to the Krishna book that he had, so that book. And so then he just took it, and out of curiosity, he just sat there, he opened the book, and as soon as he started reading, he was completely like blown over, like, what is this?
And so he read the book non-stop for like 3 days and 3 nights without stopping, because he was so touched by the book, and he realized that what a fool he had been all his life. And he realized his mistakes, and he really repented very, very deeply after reading that book. And he had great awakening. So after reading the book, he just ran out of his house to find the place where these people are.
Because behind every book, there's a list of, like, there's addresses about the local center. So he went to the local temple, knocked on the door. As soon as the temple president, whoever opened the door, some devotee opened the door, he just fell down and he just started like weeping, really, that I'm so sorry, like, one of you guys, showed me this book and I really treated her very badly, and then basically told the whole life story. And of course the devotees welcomed him with open arms. We were so happy to see him, and then he became a devotee. Now fast forward some years later,
he became a great devotee actually, because he was a very leadership kind of a person. So at one point he actually became the temple president, and he became a great leader in Europe.
And then after that, he went to so in Mayapur in West Bengal, like, we have a center where every year devotees from all over the world, they come together for a very special celebration in the month of March. And so he also went there, and then he happened to see that same devotee who he had ill-treated. And so as soon as he saw her, he went over and he fell on the ground, and she was, of course, so overcome with happiness just to see him, that she had, so the point being that, any contact with devotee, even though in his case he had acted in a very inimical manner, but it leaves an impression, and we don't know how, it can change our life or change the course of our life.
This is kind of the power of coming in touch with Krishna, even inimically. Even somebody thinks like, so the demon, there's a demon in Krishna's pastime, Aghasur, who was like a python, and he ate all of Krishna's boyfriends who were playing in the forest. They entered his mouth and he just ate them up. And then he kept his mouth open because Krishna was still outside. So Krishna was kind of thinking what to do now. And he was meditating on Krishna, that when is this blue boy going to enter my mouth, and I'm going to eat him up too. So Krishna enters his mouth, and then Krishna kills the demon, and he rescues all his friends from the belly of that Aghasur. And but after that happens, Aghasur's soul leaves that python body and enters into Krishna's body, and then finally sent to the Vaikuntha, the spiritual planet. So everybody's kind of astonished. How come this great demon, he achieved this destination of Vaikuntha, which even great yogis, they don't achieve after many, many lifetimes of meditation on Krishna. So what did he actually do? What was his, how did this happen? This was like quite miraculous. So Sukadeva Goswami answers that two things happened that basically gave him that supreme mercy. One is that for a fraction of a second, he meditated on the form of Krishna while he was waiting, but just to kill him. But he meditated on Krishna's form with quite intent. And then he came in touch with Krishna's body, because when Krishna entered his body, he came in touch with him. So those two qualified him to achieve that, and especially Krishna's special mercy. So anyways, and then Sukadeva Goswami says, what to speak of devotees who constantly meditate on Krishna and then give their life to serving Krishna. So if Aghasur achieves that destination, then the devotees will definitely. So anyways, the point is Agyata Sukriti is very powerful. Any touch with Krishna is beneficial.
And that's why devotees are continuously trying to come up with creative ways for people to come in touch in some way, so that they can keep collecting these spiritual credits, which will one day fructify. Because there is no other. Actually, this discussion happens in Madhurya Kadambini, which is another book, where the question is asked: what is the origin of bhakti? Does bhakti come from our own pious credit? So then the answer is no. Something material cannot lead to something spiritual. So our material pious credit cannot produce bhakti. So then the next question that is asked is, does Krishna give bhakti? Because sometimes people say, oh, when God desires, then I'll become a devotee. But then that's also not true, because if God were to give bhakti, then he would be accused of partiality, right? And he says in the Bhagavad Gita that I'm neutral. I'm a neutral observer. I do not, neither am I inimical nor am I partial.
Krishna desires that everybody gets bhakti, but he does not actively give it to one person or the other.
So then the question comes, and then where does it come from? So then the answer is bhakti comes from bhakti. Bhakti begets bhakti. But then who is the carrier of that bhakti? So the carrier of that bhakti is a devotee, right? So the bhakti is in the heart of a devotee. So that's why a devotee has this very unique task of actually distributing this bhakti, which is not distributed by Krishna. There is no other form of distribution. The only channel for the distribution of bhakti is actually a devotee.
And a devotee can be partial. A devotee can choose whom I am going to give it to. So it's completely up to the devotee, and therefore Krishna allows the devotee to take that lead and bring. So whoever the devotee brings to Krishna, Krishna will accept that person.
Delia, go ahead.
So I have a person who comes to help me clean my house every Wednesday when we have Gita class, and sometimes she stays over and class has already begun. And at the beginning, I was like, oh, like it's time to have class and to chant, and like she's not somebody involved in this or everything. But I could tell that she wasn't hostile to it either. At least she was just like going around her business cleaning. And is that an example of this? Like when I sit down and I'm at my computer and I'm chanting, and she's just, over there wiping something down and hearing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That is how it spreads. Bhakti means that it's like a river that flows, the river of mercy. And so it'll just flow just by us coming in touch with someone, or like you're saying, we're chanting, someone overhears it, or, there's some prasadam, we give it to someone, right? Even there's just unlimited ways.
Like our spiritual master, he told us in the beginning when we started that whenever we go out in the public, wear tilak. Like tilak is the sacred marking that we wear. And we asked him that, why is that? Because we initially we felt shy that when we are going out in the public, how do we wear this marking? He said, well, wear this marking because anybody who sees this marking, it will leave an impression in their heart. And somebody may ask you, what is this marking about? And then you can explain to them what this marking is about. Just the sight of a devotee or any marking related to Krishna leaves an impression, because it's a spiritual impact that the person has, and it stays with them.
There's another story where Prabhupada was once traveling on a plane, and Prabhupada would always carry his own prasadam, his own food. So this time I think he had some puffed rice or something, and so when it was time, so then the stewardess kept coming back and saying, can I bring something for you? And Prabhupada said no, and then finally I think she got some juice or some fruits or something. But then when she saw Prabhupada open up this puffed rice, then she got really drawn to it. So she just went and she grabbed some from his plate, and she ate it. So it is also described that the remnants of a devotee is very powerful. They carry this Krishna, they carry the special potency of Krishna Bhakti. So this was the stewardess, this was her experience. And then later, she was very interested to know who this person was, because she was so attracted by Prabhupada's purity. So she actually went to the passenger list and she checked him out and found out who he, how. So anyways, this happened, finished. This is end of this one part. Many years later, there was some devotee who were distributing books.
Like 20, 30 years after that. They were distributing books in North Carolina, some neighborhood, and they knocked on a door, and this lady, this stewardess, she opened the door And she was so happy to see the devotees, and she told them the whole story.
Then she told them the next part of the story.
And how she became a devotee, and she was practicing, and she found the books, and then the whole thing.
And the way she found out was because after that she went and looked up the passenger list, and she found the name, and then she looked him up, and then she ordered the books, and she started reading, and then the rest is history. Like,
and there's another story, like when Prabhupada went to Russia, even he just went to Russia once. It's very hard to get the visa to go to Russia in the 70s. It's practically impossible. And Shyam Sundar Prabhu, his disciple, he went with him. And Prabhupada was walking near that the central place where the palaces are, so when he was walking outside the palace, there were two guards who were guarding the door, and they were standing like really stiff and just doing their job. And this guard, he was looking at Prabhupada. Nobody watched him, but he was looking at Prabhupada very intently because he had never seen somebody like that in Russia before. Because Prabhupada was dressed in saffron like a sannyasi. So he was very fascinated by this monk, and he kept looking at Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada just went away. Many years down the line, then devotees meet this guard who looked at Prabhupada so intently, and he was so touched by the Prabhupada that he found out who this person was, and somehow he got a Prabhupada's book, and then he became a devotee. So that it says that even a glimpse of a pure devotee, it says that Chanardena pi tulayena sorgamna punarbhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya muktanam kimatashisha. The Chanardena, that's even half a second of a glimpse of a pure devotee is enough to plant the seed of bhakti in one's heart. And that Sukriti is so powerful that you can see in the life of this guard who was just transformed by that sight, and he became a devotee just because of that.
Story over story over story.
Thousands of such stories.
Thousands of such stories where just a little contact, and so that's why the responsibility of a devotee is so great, because Krishna is very pleased when we are able to carry this bhakti, because that's the only thing that is lacking in this world. There is enough of everything, but this bhakti is something that is so rare and that can actually purchase Krishna. So when a devotee distributes that, then Krishna is very obliged. So I hope that helps, Delia. That's a very good question.
Didi, Hare Krishna Prabhuji and Didi.
Yes.
Like today when you were telling all this thing, one thing came in my mind, and I thought that it is very good to share here. Like 2 weeks ago, I heard one not the story, is the real thing. Like what happened that about this like a Gita book marathon, this thing. And I heard that in like one of the group of devotee, they were trying to reach out to the hotels. And then when they were calling in different hotels, they were calling in one hotel because they had so many room, and the devotees wanted to put so many, a desire to put as much as Gita book there. So they already counted how, before calling them, they even found out how many rooms that hotel has. And then after that, they put the book ready in their car, and then they call. They thought that if they say okay, they were gonna just go and drop it. But when they were calling in the that hotel, the people whoever picked the phone up, they were not very interested to have the book. And in that hotel, I came to know that there were 2 person in the shift, one person in one time and one person in the another time. And the person who was there that time, the devotee were calling, and then he was so in one point very irritated, and he said that, how many times you have been calling? Stop calling here, I don't want to hear, what is that, like that. And then and the devotees were not even giving up, and they were calling and calling and calling. And in one point, that person, even though he was not interested, just to avoid them, he said that, okay, just give me the number, and then if we are interested, we'll call you, we'll let you know, just give us your phone number. And he just noted down the number and then put somewhere on the desk. And the other person, the person who picked up the phone, was somebody else, and the other person in the shift was a Indian person, Indian employee. And he always used to to read the Gita, a Bhagavad Gita, in his free time. So when he was, and one day when he was reading a Gita book in the evening, and I heard that one of the ladies, she came in a very rush, very sad, very frustrated. And then when she checked in, and she is like she sat there in the sofa like in the lobby, and she was very, very sad. And she came to commit suicide. That day she was very, very sad for something, and she wanted to really, she said that I'm gonna go in that hotel and commit suicide. She came in that mentality. And then she didn't have nothing to do, like other people go to the hotel, eat, enjoy, like do something. And then she just saw that person from India, like he who always used to read the Gita book, and he saw, like the lady, she saw him, and she just said, "What are you reading? What book is that?" And he said, "Oh, this is a Bhagavad Gita, and can I read it?" And she just wanted. And then she took the Gita book from him, just like randomly. Even she was not interested, but she didn't know what to do. Her mind was not working. And then he gave the book, and then she took to the room. And then that day, if she didn't read the book, she would commit suicide. But like when she was reading a book, she was on the page of the body and the soul, and all the Prabhupada, all these nice words. It made her mind change. She said that, "Oh my God, this problem in the life is nothing. Your body and soul, all this, like a great thing." Her eyes appeared in that page, and it changed her mind. And tomorrow morning, when she whole night, like she read that book, and tomorrow morning when she was she had to go leave the hotel, she told that person that, "You know what, thank you so much, this book saved my life. Look, now I want to," she doesn't even know devotees are calling there. And before she left, she said to the person that, "You saved my life. If you put this book in every room, how many lives you're gonna save? Do this work right now. If you can bring this book, put it." So like and then later, and those like that person from India who used to read a book, he told the other shift manager that, or other shift person and the manager that, "Oh, this thing happened in our hotel. One of the ladies, she came, with this mentality, but this Bhagavad Gita saved her." She said that even she suggested us to have this book. What can we do? And the other guy said, "Oh, you know what, there are some people, keep calling, like and I told them, just give me your phone number. Maybe one day I will think about it. Can we call them?" Then with all these manager and two shift person with their like idea, and they called those devotee with that phone number. And then they said that, "You know what, you guys actually were calling for us for good reason. Can you please bring all those books?" And those devotees, they didn't even ask how many room they had, like you have. They already wanted to put the like a book in every room, and their book was ready already as like a 112 or like something, and they brought it and put it in the rooms.
It's a great story. It's actually Samratini's mother.
Yeah,
Right?
I just heard 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, there are so many such stories, and this is one of the service that our group does here. We send out like thousands of Bhagavad Gitas to motels and hotels and prisons every year. Like on the average, we send out at least 1,000 Gitas every month. So that's part of our service to spread this knowledge.
So it's very nice. Thank you. Okay. Any other question, or you can?
I have a question, Mataji.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Shweta.
Actually, it's related to that story of Ajamil.
Yeah.
I mean, he kept his son's name as Narayan, and that was also with the mercy of God, I guess, because it was kept by some saint. I don't remember the name, but is that so? And why did God choose him, like to change his path and
Such a good
help
question.
him?
That's a very good question. Actually, we for the longest time, we used to wonder like how, like he was such a not a very nice person. He actually, there's a history, and we'll get into the history of Ajamil. He was actually, he gave up his wife, he abandoned his wife to marry this prostitute. He gave up his old, he basically really treated his old parents, elderly parents, in a very, very terrible manner. He committed all kinds of sinful activities. But here is something that is really amazing about Ajamil, which is that before he did all this, he was actually a devotee.
He was a very good Brahmin, chanted the mantras properly, served his parents nicely, and he was a Pakka Brahmin, but he fell down.
He fell down. So this is actually...
And then also, while he was married to the prostitute, while his wife was pregnant with this little boy, some saintly people actually came to stay in their village. So this Ajamil guy, he was out of town, and his wife, she had some faith in the saintly people. So
and she was pregnant at the time.
She was pregnant, so she hosted these saintly people, and served them nicely. So the saintly people, they got very pleased with her. And the morning before they were leaving, they asked like, okay, what looks like you are having a child, so why don't you name this child Narayan? And then the wife said, okay, as your blessing, I'll keep the boy's name Narayan.
So this is how Krishna, this is another thing that is connected to this discussion of Agyata Sukriti, that once a person approaches Krishna, then even if you fall away, and even if one goes back and starts committing all kinds of abominable activities, one's spiritual life is never lost. And Krishna never forgets. And Krishna, one way or the other, he will drag that person back. So your question is so good, because why did Ajamil, just keep his son's name, Narayan? I mean, that was not a coincidence. That was actually arranged by Krishna. He sent his devotees to Ajamil so that Ajamil's wife could actually get the benefit. And in that way, and that way Ajamil was finally, just by this chanting, which he was doing unconsciously, he kept getting purified. And in the end, he is delivered from his sinful life.
Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you, Mother.
We had to say.
Go ahead, Delia. Go ahead, Delia.
I think we have discussed it also during our Gita session, is that even Valmiki was unable to chant name of Rama when he was asked to do so. And then he was asked to do it in reverse way, and then so that 2 times he does it and he utters it once. And even though he was not knowing who is Rama and how it is going to benefit him and all, but it did all benefits to him. And from a demon, he became a sage after chanting the names repeatedly.
Yeah, there's so many such stories. Thank you. Yes, Delia, go ahead.
I was just wondering, if I decide to get a dog and name my dog one of Krishna's names, is that still valid, or is there a point where you go too far and it's considered sacrilegious and offensive?
No, we have friends. We have
a very close friend of ours, Sankirtan Yagya. He has 6 or 7 cats, and all the cats are named after.
And his wife is not a devotee as such, but she wants to name. She's named all the cats
after Krishna's names,
Radharani, Nimai. She keeps calling their name, so even though she doesn't chant, she has, she's not really a practicing devotee, but we always laugh that just by calling the names all the time, she takes very good care of them.
And she has a lot of love for the cats, so when she calls out the names of the cats, there's a lot of love in those names, right? Radharani, she'll call out with a lot of feeling. So, but Krishna is only looking for that feeling, whether you're calling for the cat
and it's so interesting that even though she really hasn't taken up, but in the whole year, she never goes to the temple. There's only one day out of the year that she goes to the temple, at which she never misses, is the day of Radharani's appearance.
Because she wants to go and see Radharani's feet, because now they have stopped it in the temples, but earlier the Radharani's feet, you could see them on that particular day. Otherwise, the deity, they would not see the feet.
And she would come for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Krishna's names are very, very powerful, and there are no hard and fast rules to actually chanting them. One can chant them anywhere.
And you can name other things in your house too. If you want to name them after Krishna, your bag, your table, just name them after Krishna.
It's just a matter of essentially
your laptop.
continuously, because the more we are in contact with this name, it is described that there are only 2 sentient entities in this material world. One is the jiva and the other is the name. And our meeting with Krishna in this material world, our first point of contact is actually the name. And so it is described that actually the name and Krishna, they're non-different from each other, but there is still one difference between the name and Krishna. And that difference is that the name is actually more merciful than Krishna. And the name is actually what will take us whatever we want. however we want to, whatever it is that we are desiring in our spiritual life, like who am I, what is my relationship with Krishna, my eternal loving service to Krishna, all of that will be actually revealed by the name alone. So the entire process of bhakti actually is about cultivating this relationship with the holy name. And to the extent that we spend our life trying to cultivate this relationship, to that extent, we can be rest assured of complete success. And I guess the other thing to consider is that this is something to think about, that if Ajamil, by unconsciously chanting the names of Krishna, and you'll see how he receives such great benediction that the Vishnu Dutas come to get him, what kind of destination or what kind of benediction awaits people who have actually consciously taken up the practice of chanting and trying to cultivate this loving relationship. It cannot even be understood. It cannot even be understood. And this is something that in the Shrimad Bhagavatam devotees are even wondering when Putana is delivered, right? You want to?
Hare Krishna Mataji,
Yes,
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
As a past story, all the Krishna stories, demon gets easily mercy from Krishna, then this end.
Demons, they get easy mercy from Krishna then?
Then saint.
Saintly people. Yeah, why is that?
Why?
It appears like they get easy, and the demons, they get the mercy because Krishna is just trying to show that anybody who approaches him, even with animosity or hatred, the demons approach Krishna with animosity and hatred, and but their feelings and thoughts about Krishna are very intense. Like, for example, Kamsa, he was continuously thinking of how to kill Krishna. He was very afraid of Krishna, and he was continuously thinking about Krishna day and night, but in a negative way. But still, that was so powerful that Krishna, when finally killed him, he achieved the 4-armed form in Vaikuntha. Kamsa was sent to the Vaikuntha planet immediately. So it just shows that the saints, they actually get the mercy even more. It appears that they don't get the mercy, but Krishna uses the saintly people to show to the world that how great my devotees are. So sometimes the saintly people will go through more difficulties, appears, or they will go through some difficult challenges in life. But it's only to like gold, when you put that in fire, the gold becomes brighter and brighter. So Krishna uses his devotees to, like, as an example in the whole society, that look at my devotees, they can do anything for me. Because he can't do the same thing with demons. The demons will run away, but the devotees, they stay tied to Krishna. The more difficulties come, the tighter they become with Krishna. And this is to show, like the Pandavas and Draupadi, and look at all these examples. I mean, they went through so much difficulty.
And ultimately, Krishna's love and Krishna's chastisement, it is the same, right? So even with the so-called demoniac people, Lord Chaitanya came not to the idea is that our difficulty is with their demoniac propensity, not with the demons themselves, because actually every living entity is eternally a pure spark of Krishna, and there's no difference in that sense between someone who is saintly or someone who is who has demoniac qualities, because they are both part and parcel of Krishna. The difference, so when Lord Chaitanya came 500 years ago, his whole purpose was to actually destroy the demoniac propensity in a person. So he did not kill anybody. He in fact rectified and transformed their hearts, and like that there are so many stories in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes also. So that is because if he wanted to kill the demons, then all of us would have no hope. So that is what the holy name is doing. So we'll pause here. Daryl and Ashley, if you have anything, Ashwin ji, Chandra Mohan ji, agar aapke koi thoughts hai, yes.
Thank
yes,
you, Mataji. Nothing at present.
Nothing. Yes, Delia, go ahead. There's no one else.
I have a question about text 19. Says, although not having fully realized Krishna, persons who have even once surrendered completely unto his lotus feet and who have become attracted to his name, form, qualities, and pastimes are completely freed of all sinful reactions, for they have thus accepted the true method of atonement. I'm confused about the scope of this phrase, completely freed of all sinful reactions? Because I mean, I read this and I think, okay, well, I'm someone who probably has not fully realized Krishna, but have surrendered, you know, at least once. And I'm attracted to like his names and forms and qualities and everything. But I don't know, like, it almost doesn't seem real sometimes though. Like, is this true right now that, you know, that I'm completely freed from all sinful reactions? Can you elaborate?
Such a good question. Such a good question. Love it. Very nice. I don't think there's anyone else who wants to. You want to go?
You go and then I'll go.
Yeah, so it's called imperceptible liberation. You know, this is imperceptible liberation, which means that we are not able to really see it for ourselves that we are liberated. But, you know, Lord Ramachandra also, you know, he also says the same thing, that if one simply even once says that from this day on, I am yours, then from that day on, I award that person fearlessness and complete courage, right? And that person will come to me. So whenever, at any point, if a living entity even once, you know, imperfectly says that, you know, or thinks of Krishna or remembers Krishna, or even says, I am yours, or I try to surrender to Krishna, even out of sentiment, then what happens is from that point on, technically, they're not being controlled by the material laws, the material laws anymore. But what happens is Krishna starts to personally start guiding their life and taking control of their life. And from that time on, it's like a car was moving in this direction. At that point, the direction of the car changes, and there's a complete, you know, U-turn. And now your car or your life is now moving towards Krishna. And so liberation is actually a very insignificant byproduct of the process of bhakti.
So the getting rid of sinful reactions is a very small side effect of just even once calling out to Krishna, because Krishna is like the sun, and when the sun comes out, how long does it take for the darkness to go away, right? The sinful reactions are like darkness, and as soon as the light of Krishna's sun comes out even once, boom, the sinful reactions are gone. Now the question may be, then why am I still suffering? Or I still feel that my heart is not pure and I'm struggling, and then we all go through that phase when we feel that I'm not fully Krishna conscious, but I'm trying to be Krishna conscious, and I have some bad habits or whatever I have, or I'm going through some sufferings. So what is the deal here? Are my sinful reactions not completely gone, or what's going on here? And that is described, it is answered. Prabhupada answers that's yeah, sinful reactions are gone, but what happens is sometimes we may engage in some sinful activities again. So some sinful reactions will accumulate because of that. And what Krishna does is he also may use some remnants of sinful reactions in our life from past to take out this the propensity for material enjoyment from our heart. So it's like a doctor who's using a needle to get into our body and take out something which is not good for us. So Krishna can use that.
Thorn removing a thorn.
Thorn removing a thorn. So, but it's happening under the expert care of the doctor. We are no longer driven by the forces of nature. It may seem like that to us because we are not aware of Krishna, how he is working, but it's happening under, now we are transferred from the prison ward to like a luxury ward where we are under the special care of the president, and he's personally watching over our progress and making sure that we can get rid of the material desires from our heart. That's what Krishna wants. So sinful reactions are gone, but some may be accumulated again, or Krishna may be using some remnants from the past.
Because our purpose is not just to get rid of sinful reactions. Our purpose is to develop love for Krishna. So liberation is a very, very insignificant point. So at that point, yes, I mean, technically one is liberated, but then one still has all these desires. One is still not developed one's relationship with Krishna. One still hasn't realized because the same thing is going to happen with Ajamila also. By the way, Ajamila doesn't go back to Godhead right away. He's simply given, so his sinful reactions are over, means that now one can practice the process of bhakti. So it's a beginning of bhakti actually. It's not the end of bhakti.
It is said that even by once calling out the name of Krishna, even unconsciously, one wipes out sinful reactions from millions and millions of lifetimes that one can't even imagine. So even one name of Krishna is sufficient to wipe out those sinful reactions. That is not the big problem. I guess what we want to get to is get rid of the material desires and develop our full surrender to Krishna. So that takes a little bit of time, and Krishna helps us with that.
Is sinful reactions karma, or what
Yeah.
is it specific? Karma, yes. Okay.
All right. So thank you so much. I think Bhagavatam, I don't know what you guys think about it, but Bhagavatam is, really nice. I think we can
do maybe twice
a week also. We could try Bhagavatam, and once a week we can do Bhagavad Gita. All right. So thank you. We'll continue on Monday then. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Pratibha. We didn't hear from Amrit
Pratibha today.
Pratibha today. Yeah, she was quiet. Kalpana.